Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 1st meeting of the Chinese Historical Society of Southern California. As many of you know, we have been conducting monthly meetings since 1976. That's more than 45 years, and maybe in a few years, actually, we're going to be celebrating our 50th. So I hope some of you will still be around and helping us with that celebration. In the meantime, what we want to do is to continue our agenda, and that is of sharing our rich Chinese American history. There's a lot to learn, and we dive into many aspects of our history. We are working with our many interns toward publishing a book on our 5 Chinatowns of early Los Angeles. We are recruiting many interns to help us with some of our important cataloging and archival work. We are seeking new interns, new volunteers to help us with our walking tours. Just this past month, we provided a big walking tour for 50 members of navies from 48 countries who toured Chinatown, thanks to some of our docents, some of whom are on the screen here right now. So there's a lot to learn, a lot to share. And tonight, we're going to take a dive into one particular aspect of Chinese American history and culture. And so I won't take any longer. A little bit later, we'll have an opportunity for discussion. This meeting is being recorded, and we are going to make it available online on YouTube if you aren't able to catch all of it. But in the meantime, my greetings to all of you. It's good to see many of your names and faces out there. And without further ado, I'll relay this to Susan Dixon, our program chair, who, well, actually, was it you, Ricky, who was going to introduce? I'm sorry,
Yes.
My fault. Yeah, my fault. Because you actually had brought this stellar speaker to us. Ricky Leo is our vice president, and this month he's acting as program chair, and will introduce our speaker. Take it away.
Hi, my name is Ricky Leo. Like Jean said, I'm the vice president of the Historical Society. And before I introduce our guest speaker, I would like to share a short video with you because of the Chinese Lunar New Year.
I'm Grace Leo, the president of Ventura County Chinese American Association. The dance you're about to see is from China. It's called the Lotus Dance. Lotus representing prayer, beauty, and hope. I hope you enjoyed the dance.
Now I'd like to introduce our tonight's speaker is Dr. David Lowe. Dr. Lowe was a pediatrician for many years in Camarillo, California, but he's currently working as a physician and a surgeon at the Ventura Youth Correctional Facility. In November of 2017, he passed an inaugural lifestyle medicine board examination to become among the first group of physicians in the nation to be board certified in lifestyle medicine. My wife Grace and I first met Dr. Lowe several years ago when we were trying to contact families in Ventura County who had Chinese American veterans who served in World War II. We wanted to tell them about the Congressional Gold Medal and help them to register for the award. Dr. Lowe, like my father, served in World War II despite institutionalized discrimination that they faced. And both of our fathers finally received their medals in a ceremony in the Simi Valley in November of 2001. Grace and I know Dr. Lowe and his wife Flo when they invited us to attend their gourmet vegan club. This was our first experience with whole food, plant-based diet. The food they prepared for these potluck dinners were so delicious without meat, oil, sugar, salt. And we learned more about healthy lifestyle living when we attended his Diabetes Undone class and the Whole Food Conference that his church sponsored. And I think you'll enjoy this talk tonight. And I would now like to introduce you to Dr. Lowe.
Where is he? You lost him. Oh, thank you very much, Ricky, for that introduction. And I'm very happy to be with you tonight. I know this is just your first meeting, I think, since the Chinese New Year. So Gong Hee Fa Choi. And I don't know if I pronounced that very well because I was born in Walla Walla, Washington. My mom was born in China in the Shandong province, and she met my father in Tennessee in college. My dad was born in Panama, although his grandfather was from China, and immigrated to Panama. My dad was born there. He went to school in Panama and Costa Rica, and then finally in college in Tennessee. That's where he met my mom. So since their common language was English, we didn't get too much in the way of Chinese, nor did we get much in the way of Spanish until much later in our growing up years. So I wanted to share with you, since I guess the term and greeting during Chinese New Year really, I learned, doesn't really say Happy New Year. It's actually wishing people wealth and health. And so wanted to share with you something in regards to health, because if you don't have health, it doesn't matter how much wealth you have, you're not going to be able to enjoy it unless you have good health. So we wanted to share with you some secrets of longevity, as Ricky had titled this presentation, the secrets of living longer. And this really started coming to the forefront with a National Geographic article in November of 2005, and it was called The Secrets of Living Longer. And what they had been working on prior to the publication of this article was looking for areas around the world in which they could clearly document longevity and health condition for these people that were living longer lives, and to see if they also not only lived longer, but whether they also lived healthier. So the first area that they identified was Sardinia, part of Italy, the country of Italy. It's the western island off the coast of Italy. And it's the central highlands of Sardinia that was identified as the first blue zone. The second blue zone identified was Okinawa, Japan, which is also the southernmost island of the country of Japan. And then the third blue zone, as it was called, was Loma Linda, California, a little city in Southern California. It's about an hour east of Los Angeles on the I-10 freeway in San Bernardino County. And so you can see that the Okinawans are isolated on an island. They're going to be a fairly homogeneous group and probably have a lot of close genetic relationships. The same with Sardinia, Italy, because they're isolated on an island. But Loma Linda is a city. It's isolated, but not geographically. The reason why Loma Linda is a blue zone is because there's a high concentration of Seventh-day Adventist church members residing in that city, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So what you see here is kind of a graphic demonstration of the difference between the regular health and vitality and longevity of the American population and differing from the blue zones. So on the vertical or x-axis, you see the percent of vitality, which hopefully they start out with 100 or near 100 at the very beginning of life. And as they go out in years on the y-axis to the right, per decade, you can see that already, even by 30 years of age, the optimal health and vitality has dropped maybe by about 10%. By 40, it gets down to 20% loss. So you're down to about 80% of optimal health and vitality. And after that, there's this almost straight line decline in health and getting to poor health, then progressive chronic disability, and then death on an average of about 86 years of age. Whereas with the blue zones, there's more of a straight line, horizontal line for the majority of 70 years or plus, and maybe down to about 85, 90% of optimal health and vitality, and then still a less gradual decline compared to the standard American type of lifeline. And then there's this sharp drop off at the end. And that's basically what you want to have. You want to just go along with the best in health and vitality. And then when it's time to end your life, you just want to drop off and so have more of a rectangular type of survival curve. And the difference is in what they're looking at is the blue zones. And the question is, can we learn anything from these blue zones? So here we have a Venn diagram, which is a nice way of comparing the three original blue zones. And you have Loma Linda in the top and Sardinia, Italy on the left, lower, and Okinawa, Japan on the right, lower. And so what they have in the outer parts of these circles have the unique part of each of the blue zones. And then you have overlapping areas between the other two blue zones. And then you have in the center, you have the overlapping where all three blue zones have some commonality. And so this is maybe a way that we can learn from the blue zones by looking at what are the shared commonalities of all three. And so what's interesting is even though they have some unique things about them, there are some crossovers and shared things, and then there's the real shared things in the middle. And so what you see here, the 6 things in the center are family, not smoking, a plant-based diet, constant moderate physical activity that's built into their daily routine, social engagement, and legumes. That's beans, peas, and lentils. So there are 2 dietary factors in here, the plant-based diet and specifically legumes. There is obviously activity and exercise involved, but there's some social things also involved, and some lifestyle things. So you can also see that there are some things that overlap. So Loma Linda overlaps with Okinawa in that they have a high soy consumption. So for those of you who've been concerned about soy or heard things about soy, hopefully that will put that to rest a little bit. We can talk about more about that in a Q&A if you want. They don't have alcohol, and they have a faith. Whereas Loma Linda shares with Sardinia, Italy, in whole grains in their diet and somewhat culturally isolated. And yet Okinawa and Sardinia will share an interesting thing about sunshine gardening and empowered women. So, and yet each of them also have their uniqueness that isn't shared with any of the others. So you can see that they're coming from a variety here, and yet they have some commonalities that we can hopefully learn from. So in regards to the Seventh-day Adventists, now Loma Linda has a high concentration of Seventh-day Adventists. And what happened was Loma Linda was founded basically to build a medical school. It was originally called the College of Medical Evangelists, and it was set up to train people or physicians into becoming missionaries to other countries of the world, in order to render care and share their faith. And so as a result of that, a large concentration of Seventh-day Adventist teachers, professors, and then finally, obviously, students started coming to Loma Linda. And over the years, Loma Linda has changed from the College of Medical Evangelists to Loma Linda University Medical School, and has encompassed not only the training of physicians and even up into the different specialties, whether it be medical or surgical or whatever, but also in dentistry, in pharmacy, in physical therapy, nursing, all the other allied health professions, the medical technologists, x-ray techs, and the like. And so there's a high concentration of Seventh-day Adventists there. But also what has happened is that as people have retired, they have moved to Loma Linda because of the fact that it's Southern California weather, for one thing, but also because they have the medical center there, which can help take care of their medical needs if they need them, and yet share the same either faith or lifestyle or emphases in their daily lives. And so because of that, Loma Linda, even though it's a small town, has a high concentration of Seventh-day Adventists, but they are not genetically related. They're culturally and faith related. In Loma Linda, there are, to my thinking, the highest number of ethnic diverse churches in that town. So they not only have the university church, the Loma Linda University Church, but they have the Indonesian church, the Japanese, the Chinese, the Filipino, the Hispanic, the Thai, the Laotian. I mean, you name it, and they've got it there, all in the same town. So you can see people from all over the world and international students who want to come and be trained there have come there and make up part of the population. So it's a very ethnically diverse town, but they're all united by one common either mission or faith, or an emphasis of maintaining good health. So the first inkling in regards to the reason why they could study the Seventh-day Adventists was because there was a study called the Adventist Mortality Study, which was started in 1958. And it was examining just Seventh-day Adventists in California. And it was morphed into the AHS1, Adventist Health Study 1, that started in 1974 and went in 2006. Again, now expanded to over 30,000 Seventh-day Adventists in California, and they were comparing them with the non-Seventh-day Adventists in California. And you can see here later on, the Adventist Health Study 2 was started in the year 2002, and it is still ongoing. So it is about 20 years and it enrolled 97,000 Seventh-day Adventists in North America, and they were 30 years of age or plus, and that was a much more expanded study, and we'll get into some of the details of that. But in AHS1, they identified certain things in regards to longevity, and what they noted was that there was nearly a 10-year extra longevity in the California Seventh-day Adventists in comparison to those who were not Seventh-day Adventists, and they tried to tease out what those factors were. Some byproducts of that study was that they found that the consumption of, by reducing red and white meat was associated with decreasing cancer. Eating legumes was protective for colon cancer. Eating nuts was reducing heart attacks by 50%. That would be eating nuts at least 4 times a week. Drinking more water reduced heart disease by 50%. And high consumption of tomatoes was first known now to reduce prostate cancer by 40%. And drinking soy milk more than once a day was reducing prostate cancer by 70%. So quite remarkable. But what they found was that if you distilled it down to 5 habits that Seventh-day Adventists had promoted over 100 years, the church was founded in 1863, that these 5 factors, regular exercise, eating a plant-based diet, eating small amounts of nuts regularly, maintaining normal body weight, and not smoking. And so when they compared those who had the best lifestyle, in other words, the Seventh-day Adventists, who had the eating the nuts and vigorous exercise 3 times weekly at least, having a body mass index less than 25, and never smoking, compared to those on the opposite who didn't exercise, didn't eat that much nuts, were not under 25 body mass index, and were smoking, then there was a 10-year difference in the men, almost 11 years, and almost 9 years difference in the women. What was interesting was there wasn't exactly, when they teased these factors out, there wasn't equal between the men and the women. So the biggest impact for men is vegetarianism and frequent nut consumption, which is amazing. That's more powerful than extending life through not smoking. Whereas in women, the biggest factor for longevity was vigorous exercise, and followed by having a normal weight. Less of an impact from their diet and from not smoking. So, and they hardly, didn't have as big a robust extension of life by nut consumption. So the men really get by with frequent intake of nuts, whereas the women not so much. So when you looked at the extra years, just from the California Adventists that were not vegetarian versus the ones who were vegetarian, you can see that there was this greater advantage to being vegetarian Seventh-day Adventists, both in men and in women. This is another way of looking at it, looking at what is the percentage chance of surviving to age 65 and 85, and it's comparing it with other countries. So they were looking at it, and again, the California Adventist vegetarians had a much higher rate, both male and female percentages. 90% in the males of reaching 65, almost 50% to 85. In females, over 94% reaching 65, and 60% reaching 85. So obviously, you can see here that a lot more Adventists are going to be able to take advantage of Social Security than those who are not. I mentioned that in regards to nuts and water and things like that. So Adventist Health Study 2 was a little different design, and they enrolled people, and then they classified them in 5 different dietary groups. And those who were the non-vegetarian, which is almost 48%, the lacto-ovo vegetarians, they did not consume any meat or flesh foods, but consumed milk and or dairy or eggs. The pesco-vegetarians, which were like the lacto-ovo vegetarians, but they also ate fish. Then the vegans, which did not have any animal products at all. And then the semi-vegetarian, which would eat meat less than once a week. And so you had these 5 dietary different groups, and you can see that the great majority were the non-vegetarians, and the next to the lowest group were the vegans. But because of the study, they could study the Seventh-day Adventists because they had at least 7,000 or 8,000 vegans in the group. So it made it a large enough number that they could compare these different groups. And so you see here the vegans being in green and the non-vegetarians being in more the orange. You can see in comparison here to the unfortunately, I can't read what was on here, but I'm thinking this is about, let's see here. Yeah, I'm not being able to read this because I can't see the top of the slide. But they're comparing those with diabetes, those with high cholesterol, those with hypertension. And again, you'll see a kind of a stepwise thing. The only thing that did not follow the same type of relationship in regards to the advantage of being vegan versus non-vegetarian was in the mortality. And we can get to that later when we get to the other blue zones. But you see, like with hypertension, the blacks still exceed the whites, but again, they still have somewhat this stair-stepping advantage, lower incidences among the vegans versus the non-vegetarians or semi-vegetarians. So Dan Buettner, who was one of the authors of the National Geographic article, came out with a book later called The Blue Zone Solution. And by this time, they had added 2 more blue zones that they had identified. By the way, the reason why they called them blue zones is only because when they were looking at the world map and identifying these locations, they circled these locations with a blue pen and a marker, and so they just started calling them blue zones. Nothing special about the name. So they identified 2 more blue zones, the Nicoya Peninsula on the Pacific side of Costa Rica, and then Icaria, Greece, an island east of in the eastern part of the Greek Isles, almost near Turkey, as more blue zones. Interestingly, as you look at the geographic location of these, you notice they're fairly sort of a little north of the equator. They're not at the extremes, south or northern latitudes, sort of kind of the middle belt of the world. So here's Icaria, Greece. You see how it's close to Turkey there, but it's an island also, like some of the other. And this is Nicoya Peninsula, a blow up of the peninsula, but then also you can see on the right how it relates to the country of Costa Rica. So Okinawa has the highest concentration of female centenarians in the world, and Sardinia, Italy has the highest concentration of male centenarians in the world, and Icaria, Greece has the second highest concentration of male centenarians in the world. So when they looked at the different blue zones and what they ate, I'm going to guess this is, I can't see it from Icaria. These are their top longevity foods. Now you'll notice, remember that legumes was the common to all the original 3 blue zones. Well, we have chickpeas and black-eyed peas. We have legumes again showing up in the diet. They do use olive oil, and it's very, very extra virgin olive oil that they use. The feta cheese that they use is from goat or sheep, primarily goat milk. And you see they have greens and some starch in potatoes. And they have and they use a lot of lemon. They put lemon in everything, in their water, on their salads, on a lot of their foods. So in Okinawa, their legume happens to be tofu from the soybean. They all potatoes. And they have a good use of mushrooms and seaweed. Interestingly enough, even though they're on an island, fish is not a big part of their diet. It's more of the seaweed. Way back in the Okinawan history, they ate more fish, but that has become less so. As far as Sardinia, again, an island, but not fish is not a prominent part of their diet. They use goat's milk or sheep milk, no cow milk. In fact, all of the blue zones do not have cow milk or cow milk products. They have a grain, barley, and they do have sourdough bread. Their legume of beans and the chickpeas, and they do use tomato. And it's interesting that all of these blue zones kind of have different beverages, and we'll kind of look at that later on. As far as Nicoya, Costa Rica, they have also a grain or starch in the way of corn, the maize, and they have a starch in the squash. They're heavy into fruits because they're a tropical country, and black beans is their legume. And so you notice they have a narrower spectrum of foods that they eat there. So their diet is very simple. They eat beans and rice every meal practically. So does the rest of Costa Rica. And then Loma Linda, which is not an island as far as geographically speaking, and yet they have salmon as part of their diet. Avocados, because it's grown in Southern California, and a lot of nuts. Oatmeal is one of their grains, whole wheat bread also, and they're into all varieties of beans, peas, lentils, and they have the use of water and soy milk for their beverage. Now, when they distilled the blue zones, trying to look at the center part of those 6 different aspects, they came up with what they call the Power 9. And at the top is this move naturally. So they're not necessarily into gyms and fitness centers and things like that. They're not running marathons or doing triathlons or anything like that. They are just have a lifestyle that's very active. So whether it's sheep herding or gardening or washing their clothes or going places, they're just moving normally. Second of all, they have the right outlook. So having a purpose, in Japan, in Okinawa, they call it their ikigai. Do you have your ikigai? And that is, do you have a purpose in life? And finding a purpose in life has been shown to add up to 6 or 7 years to the life, having a purpose. And then downshift. This is what we call stress reduction. We know that stress contributes to chronic inflammation. Chronic stress leads to chronic inflammation, and chronic inflammation is the substrate upon which many of the chronic diseases that we see today is based on, whether it's heart disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, hypertension, chronic kidney disease, hypertension. All of these really have as their basis chronic inflammation, and even cancer. So we know that chronic inflammation is not good and chronic stress is not good. And so the ability for these people in the blue zones to downshift or to relieve stress in whatever way, whether it's through prayer, through meditation, through social engagement, the ways that they have, even maybe the use of wine, helps them to reduce stress and live longer. And then the 3 dietary things that they had in this Power 9 was the 80% rule. They borrowed the Okinawan term hara hachibu, which is to eat until you're 80% full. So you even think about that as you're starting the meal, and that you're only going to eat till you're 80% full. How they determine that, I am not really sure, but basically you're not stuffing yourself to being uncomfortable. So you leave just a little bit, maybe not quite completely satisfied in your hunger, and you stop. And we know that caloric restriction does promote longevity, as we see in the fasting mimicking diets and some of the other studies that are coming on about fasting. A plant slant, in other words, where there is primarily most of the calories, 95 to 97% of the calories are coming from plants and the rest from animal products. So even though there are some animal products, whether it's the cheese or the salmon or some of these other things in there, they are not very much a part of the makeup of the diet. They're a very small part in percentage. And then this wine at 5, even though there really wasn't, all of the blue zones are not drinking wine, but they included that in this section. And then the interesting part about belonging, the right tribe. The right tribe is gathering a group of friends that are committed to each other, no matter what, and having a group that basically has the same goals, the same outlook, the same mission, shared mission, shared lifestyle, shared goals. So these are basically close friends. And so having having that connection of the right tribe is very important. We know that being isolated, and we've seen this in COVID, certainly, but being isolated and depressed is more dangerous to your health than smoking and obesity and type 2 diabetes combined. That's how important that is. In regards to community, this is having a faith, and whether there was Greek Orthodox in Icaria, Seventh-day Adventist in Loma Linda, Catholicism in Nicoya, Costa Rica, or Sardinia, Italy, no matter what, community seemed to be a big part. And the extension to life was if you attended religious or faith-based services 4 times a month, your longevity would be increased by up to 4 years. And that's just parking your body in the building. If you were actively involved in some way with ministry, with service, with organization, with whatever, actively involved, then it would extend life up to 14 years extra. So this is not a small benefit. This is a huge, huge benefit. And then the other part in belonging was loved one first. This is talking about family. Having close family connections and relationships was a big part of this Power 9 and part of the Blue Zones. So they had 6 food practices in general, even whether it was 2 or 3 meals a day, that breakfast and lunch particularly would be the largest meals. And if they did have a 3rd meal or a dinner, it would be the lightest meal. Cooking at home. Cooking at home was a big factor in these Blue Zones. The Hara Hachibu, which we talked about, fasts, whether it was a faith-based fast or some other kind of holiday type fast or whatever they might celebratory fast, this was part of their lifestyle. And we've seen again the the power that fasting does play in extending longevity. And that's even not only just in humans, but in animals as well. Eating with friends and family and celebrating and enjoying these events is really key. You know, and we know that those who have family meals together, which is kind of rare these days in life, just eating with family, a family meal, totally uninterrupted, no reading material, no TV, no cell phones, no computers, no video games, no texting, none of that stuff, just where they concentrate with one another at least just 3 times a week. So out of 21 meals, if they're a 3-meal-a-day family, just 23 meals in a week has been shown to significantly improve health and reduce the chances of obesity and eating disorders and the like. As far as their food guidelines, we talked about them before, the plant slants, emphasis on plant, that to retreat from meat, fish may be the one exception, at least back then when they did the study, to diminish dairy, and the dairy usually came not from cows, but from sheep or goats. An occasional egg, lots of legumes, not having much in the way of sugar, adding some nuts, but that was really only mainly Loma Linda, souring on the bread, and really in the bottom right, the usually going whole. What we mean by that is that they would have unprocessed food, and processed food we consider as things in which the good things in the food are removed or bad things are added. So whether they add sugar, oil, or salt, which is not good, or whether they reduce or refined the grain, is also not good. But these blue zones didn't have that issue. The super blue zone foods, again, with the legumes, the greens, the starch from potatoes, certain grains like oats and barley and whole wheat, some spices with turmeric. A lot of turmeric is used by the Okinawans, some olive oil, particularly by the Icarians, nuts by the Loma Linda group, and green or herbal tea. So it's good that they have fruits in their diet. Of the 3 leading nutritional deficiencies in the world, they are too much salt, not enough fruits, and not enough whole grain. Those are the top 3. And so you see that in the blue zones, they address all of these. They came up with 4 always and 4 no ways from these blue zones. Always have, if you're going to have whole wheat, use 100% whole wheat, not may contain whole wheat. To have nuts, legumes, again, and fruit. And no ways is the processed stuff: sugar sweetened beverages, salty snacks, processed meat, and packaged sweets. You can see a wide range of vegetables that were used, fruits that were used, legumes, beans, peas, or lentils, grains. So it doesn't seem to make any difference as long as they were whole. The nuts and seeds, particularly almonds, but other nuts can be used as well, whether they be cashews or peanuts, or you can argue whether a peanut is a legume or a nut. Either way, it's good. And the dairy, you can see, was either sheep or goat related, not cow related. The beverages were quite varied, and so were their sweeteners and seasonings. What I think you have to be cautious, though, as you look at these blue zones, is that these things worked for that blue zone. So in other words, you can't go through and pick and choose which of these things you want to use and create your own blue zone, so to speak, because these blue zones worked in the areas that they were. So whether they would work in your area, not having their lifestyle, you're just picking up the dietary parts and the beverage parts, may not necessarily work. So you have to be cautious about extrapolating it to the general public, but there are just certain things still that we can learn. Now, as you look at, interestingly enough, the 5 different blue zones on their, where they're getting their calories from, and there's always these debates about whether you should have high carb, low carb, high fat, low fat, and all this type of thing. Well, you can see here that the blue zones vary quite widely in the carbohydrate, where the Okinawans are 80-85% of their calories from carbohydrates, whereas the Icarians only have 37% from carbohydrates. It's a huge difference. And in fats, the Okinawans are down to 6% of their calories from fat, and the Icarians are at 50% of their calories from fat. And you can see that because they have a lot of olive oil in their diet. But the common thing is the protein. They have a low average protein consumption. And of that, very little animal protein. Most of that protein is coming from the legumes rather than animal products. So you can see here with an average, the standard American diet is way above 15%, 18% of calories coming from protein, and most of that from animal protein. So there's quite a big difference here. So what we see here as you compare legumes versus meat, both supply protein. Okay, but there's some major differences in the legumes coming from the blue zones versus the meat that comes from, let's say, the standard American diet or the westernized diet. So we have, with the legumes, they have the biggest fiber bang for your buck, whereas meat has 0 fiber. Fiber is the undigestible part, the humanly undigestible part of food, and it's usually carbohydrate, what we call fiber. And it is there for a reason. It helps with motility of the bowel, but it also helps feed the microbiome, which then digests the fiber and produces short-chain fatty acids, which improve the health of the whole body. Legumes are high, since they're from plants, are high in phytochemicals, which are plant chemicals, which there are none in meat. When you're getting it from meat, the animal has already taken in those phytochemicals and used them up, so there's none in meat. Legumes are high in antioxidants, minimal in meat. The fat in legumes is pretty low, and it's not saturated, and whereas in meat or animal flesh, it is high in fat and mostly saturated. There's no cholesterol in plants, and yet all animals make cholesterol, so anything that comes from an animal will be containing cholesterol, and some higher than others. There's iron in legumes, but it's not blood iron, whereas that comes in meats, the iron that you have is from the blood that's in the meat. And so, whereas we used to think that it was good to get iron from red meat, we don't think that anymore. This iron is more toxic. It's a pro-oxidant, and it's pro-inflammatory to the body. So we don't see much the meat industry pushing you to get red meat to get your iron anymore. There are no hormones or antibiotics in the legumes, whereas they are given to the animals. There's this molecule called Nu-5GC, a carbohydrate molecule, which for some reason is not present in humans of all the animals on the planet. Humans don't have it, and so it's a foreign material that when it comes into the body, it evokes a immune response and an inflammatory response. TMAO is trimethylamine oxide. Trimethylamine is formed by the digestion of carnitine or choline coming from animal products like eggs and meat. And when the microbiome in the colon gets a hold of this carnitine or choline, it transforms it into trimethylamine, which is absorbed into the body, converted to trimethylamine oxide, which is extremely irritating to blood vessels. And so there's a higher correlation of coronary heart disease with trimethylamine oxide levels than there is with cholesterol. And of course, there's low chemical contaminants as long as you get organic legumes, and you get high chemical contaminants in animal products because they're fed usually the non-organic soybeans and grain. And there's other things that we could go into in regards to the endotoxins and the foodborne illness that you can get from animal products versus plant. The protein levels, animal protein stimulates insulin growth factor 1, which stimulates the growth of cancer and all the cells in the body. It's like fertilizer. So there are just many more advantages to a plant-based protein source like legumes instead of animal sources. When you compare plant protein with animal protein, and if you just replace 3% of the calories of animal protein with plant protein, the risk of death is reduced by 34% when you replace processed red meat. So you can see this is the biggest area that needs to be changed if you're trying to get some longevity. Next is eggs, which is 19%, 12% with unprocessed red meat, and lesser amounts with dairy and poultry or fish. But in each case, there is a benefit by this replacement of plant protein for animal protein. So this may be some of the reasons why there is longevity in the blue zones. Now, Dr. Dean Ornish, one of the fathers of might say lifestyle medicine, did a bunch of heart studies, and he's been branching out into other things. And he came up with the intensive cardiac rehabilitation program, and it's kind of 4 things. It was to eat well, stress less, move more, and love more. So it's kind of looking at it from a lifestyle approach. And when he puts people on the program, what they find is that food is not only calories, it's information. So food is information, and it can actually affect your genes and affect the epigenome. And the epigenome is the controlling switches for turning genes on or genes off. And what they found out in his program, that those who were on the program in only 3 months, they found that 501 genes were beneficially affected. And these were genes that would improve your health versus those who would not. And they would find that they would also decrease the genes that would promote prostate or breast cancer. And so they were showing these genetic panels where you can see where the genes are turned from red on to green off. And these are genes linked to breast cancer and prostate cancer. So quite dramatic. The other thing that was very interesting is as they were studying these same individuals, they were teamed up with another doctor who was a specialist in telomeres. Now, telomeres are kind of the end caps to the chromosomes. You can see them highlighted here in the bright yellow. They're kind of like the shoelace end caps on your shoelaces that prevent the shoelace from fraying. Well, this is what the telomeres do with the chromosomes. They prevent the ends from fraying and coming loose, because when they come loose, they can be damaged, or they can mutate, or they can break off and cause problems with the genetic replication. So the interesting thing is that as cells divide, the chromosomes must be duplicated and replicated. And in the process, what the body is unable to do is to completely copy the entire chromosome length. And so nature had built into it by design these telomeres on the ends of the chromosomes. And what we know is that as cells get older and they keep dividing, the telomeres get shorter and shorter, because what happens is the copies that are made of the chromosomes get shorter and shorter. But as long as there's telomeres there, they will protect the ends of the chromosomes, and they will be completely copied. As the telomeres disappear, then the copy of the chromosome will not be complete. So you have this kind of extra genetic material on each end that ensures that there'll be a complete copy until the telomeres get exhausted. What they found is that the telomeres on the end of the DNA double helix strand they're not static, and they're not necessarily going to get shorter and shorter over time. That actually there is a enzyme called telomerase, which can actually build up the telomeres. And so when they did the study on the Ornish program individuals, they found that the telomeres could actually lengthen in these people after 5 years. They measured their telomeres, and they found that these people that were being studied in regards to his program and effect on prostate cancer, they were also testing them and watching them in regards to their telomerase activity, that they found that there was a lengthening of the telomeres. So in a way, almost kind of reversing aging. Instead of progressive shortening of the telomeres, they were actually getting some reversal of that and lengthening of the telomeres over a 5-year time span. So, the question is not always, well, how long you're going to live, but it really is, are you going to be able to respond when the time is right? And as we age, generally, there is a reduction in circulation, and that circulation problems leads to a host of problems, whether it's increasing injuries to the back, to the rotator cuff muscles of the shoulder, but also in regards to having erectile dysfunction. And now we know that 40% of the 40-year-olds have erectile dysfunction. 50% of the 50-year-olds have erectile dysfunction. And so, it goes up from there. So you want to be able to respond when the time is right. And so even though youth tries to make themselves look so limber and so slim and lithe, you don't have to be that way, because as you get older, it doesn't have to limit you at all. You can be just as limber and just as healthy and active. And so this is the way we want to live our lives. So I hope you'll get something out of this. I'm going to show you a short cooking demonstrations put together by some of our friends. Raylene Wu will give you a short demonstration on some noodles. And Kevin, her brother, is going to give you a demonstration on a treat. So I hope you will enjoy these.
Hi, I'm Raylene. Let's celebrate Chinese New Year today by making soba noodle soup. So we will start by prepping, washing, cutting our vegetables and tofu. So that's all ready to go. I have pre-cooked the soba noodles. And now I'm going to make the soup base, which is basically onions, garlic, and ginger. So I will just slice up the onions. And today I'm just going to use frozen garlic and frozen ginger, which sometimes saves a lot of time. So if you're coming back on a busy work evening, you can make this soup in a very short time. So now that I've sliced my onions, I'm going to put it in my pan. So we will continue and saute our onions and garlic and ginger. And we're going to saute it and caramelize it so you'll see it turn a golden brown. And if you notice, I'm not using any oil. We just need to heat the pan up so that it's hot enough where the onions and garlic and ginger are not going to stick. We're going to caramelize it and get a really nice golden brown. So as your onions and garlic and ginger are caramelizing, I'm going to add a little bit of honey. And we do not use any salt, but we do use mushroom seasoning. So I'm just going to season the mixture a little bit, and it's going to turn a really nice golden brown. And now I'm going to add my water. To about 2/3 of the pot. And I'm going to make sure that my flame is on medium high. And then we're going to put in our tofu and our mushrooms and the goji berries. Now that it's boiling, I'm going to turn the flame a little lower and we will add our tofu. Along with our mushroom. And some goji berries for sweetness. Let's bring this to a boil. Let's cook it for about 5 minutes. So it's starting to boil now, and I wish you could be here to smell the wonderful aroma. Before I put my vegetables in, I'm going to add a little bit more mushroom seasoning and just a little drizzle of honey. If you like some pepper, you can add a little bit of pepper or some red pepper. And let's stir this up as it's boiling. That looks delicious. And let's bring it to a boil. And I'm going to add in these beautiful mini peppers, a variety of colors. Some broccoli. These are some of our favorite vegetables. Lots of antioxidant and nutrients and just beautiful colors, just vibrant and bright. So I'm going to put this in. These are a little hardier vegetables, the broccoli and the peppers. I just put in some Persian cucumbers that I just sliced up. It's very cooling and refreshing. And I think we will give a little bit of lemon juice to bring out the flavors. And bok choy, as you can see, beautiful hearts. I like to use the hearts and just cut them in half so that, you know, we will have some texture as we're having our soup. Oh, look at that color. Just so bright and beautiful. Let's bring it to a boil. We want to keep the bright green and vibrant reds and gold colors. The tofu is cooking at the same time, and your goji berries are softening up in the soup. Go ahead and give it a taste and make sure that the seasonings are to your liking. And as soon as it comes to a boil, I'm going to add some baby kale and spinach leaves, and just turn the flame off because you just want the spinach and the kale to just wilt in the hot soup, and so you'll still have that wonderful tender flavor. So it's coming to a boil. And we will add the leaves. I'm going to just push it down a little bit and let it just soften up. And now we'll just turn it off. And we are ready to serve. I have my noodles all prepared, and we will just ladle. That looks so delicious. Just and now before we actually taste this wonderful meal, I will garnish it with a little bit of green onions. And I've made a simple chili sauce if you like that little bit of spice. Some barbecue sauce, you can use hoisin sauce. I like to use tamari and a little bit of the chili. So we'll drizzle it on here. And I hope you enjoy your wonderful soba noodle soup.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I'm going to show you how to make a super easy dessert with dates, some pecans, and some peanut butter or almond butter if you like. So first of all, what you're going to do is you're going to pick a nice plump dates, and the dates that I use are the Majul dates, and you want to pit them, so I just slice them, Open it up, take the pits out, and then you want to put some almond butter or peanut butter inside. And then you top it off with a pecan. And I like to roast my pecans because it gives it a nice nuttier flavor. So what you do is you put these in your freezer for about a couple hours. And when they come out, what I like to do is I like to melt some dark chocolate. And I actually use a dark unsweetened chocolate because the dates are so sweet that the bitterness of the chocolate will be a nice offset from it. And I just drizzle some dark chocolate on it, and because the dates are really cold, the chocolate will solidify right away, and then you can serve it immediately to your friends. And it's just like a candy bar. It's healthy and it's natural. And one thing also, when you put in the almond butter or peanut butter, you want to make sure that the almond or peanut butter just contains either almonds or peanuts, no other additives, just ground almonds or ground peanuts. And the dates are just natural. It contains fiber and it's nice and sweet, and it's the perfect dessert.
Okay, are we?
So great. Yeah, if that concludes your presentation, I can start with some of the Q&A. But thank you very much. You know, this was really very informative, and I actually feel pretty good hearing about all of this, because my wife and I just planted some fava beans in our backyard to go along with our snow peas and kale and other greens. So hopefully we're doing the right thing. Anyway, yeah, there have been several good questions, and you know, it's really great learning about the people in the blue zones and how many have actually some fairly similar lifestyles and foods. So we are very interested. By the way, I note that probably 90% of our audience here is women. So maybe there's something us guys have to learn. We perhaps have an addiction to red meat and alcohol and other things, which from seeing the charts here, you know, are really things that negatively affect our longevity. At the same time, you know, there's someone here in the audience who I believe is the daughter of someone who lived to 105, and he looked pretty good all the way up to the very end. And one thing I learned was that he had oatmeal for breakfast every morning. So that was a good thing. Let me get on with some questions. I think Irene had a couple. One was, why do goat or sheep cheese, why are those acceptable as it compared to cow's milk cheese?
That's a good question. The biggest difference you'll see is in the size of the animal, right? So the animal, the cow, is giving its milk to give you the milk, and then from that we form the cheese. The cow, in America anyway, the cows are usually pregnant, and they're impregnated repeatedly in order to allow them to continue to produce milk. And so in the milk comes a lot of hormone. The highest levels of particularly estrogen, things like that, would be in the milk, and there are growth factors in the milk as well that are to be produced. The cow is producing its milk not for humans, but for baby calves. And when the baby calf is born, it needs to be able to grow fairly rapidly. They gain about 400 pounds in the first year of life. So there's strong, powerful growth factors in the cow milk. Whereas sheep and goats, they don't have to get to be that big in the first year of life. And so the amount of growth factors in their milk is very low. So yes, there are some, you might say, plus factors for growing fast and growing big, but that's not good for humans generally, and particularly after weaning or after you get into adulthood. You don't want all those growth factors. So what we're seeing is then that the animal size and the need for rapid growth, weight gain, and that type of thing in cows is much stronger than it is in the smaller animals.
Yeah, so yeah, I can see that. Related to that, well, by the way, I also happen to like the flavor of goat cheese and sheep cheese much better. It seems like there's more density of flavor, so maybe there's something in that flavoring, maybe nutrients that are more beneficial. Related to that is if we substitute milk, cow's milk, with almond milk, is it a good idea to have an almond milk with a calcium supplement so that you can make up for any deficiencies?
Good question. There's plenty of calcium in almonds, as there is in all the legumes, so even in soy. So you have plenty of calcium in soy milk and in almond milk. Maybe not as much in rice milk. However, the nut and seed milks will generally have more calcium and usually plenty. So you don't have to supplement with calcium.
I saw a couple of comments, but maybe not so much questions. Let me ask one for myself. I saw a term, hara hachi bu. What was that? I didn't quite catch the definition of it.
Yeah, it means to eat to not quite full, and roughly about 80% of full. So it's not to eat to the point that you're really feeling full. You want to feel just slightly satisfied and full, not to where you're like definitely not uncomfortable, but even way short of that. So you don't want to eat till you think you're completely full. It's to limit your caloric intake, and it's a Japanese term called harahachibu.
I've heard of a strategy where it's better to not fill your plate, always just fill it 75 or 80%.
Well, that's a good way to do it. Just
portion control.
Yeah, build that in right at the beginning. Yeah,
right.
Either that or use smaller plates.
Yeah. In terms of belonging and loving and being loved, I know that actually many of the people on the screen here I recognize as longtime friends, and I feel that we are part of a community. We've known some of these. I've seen some of these friends for 40 years, and they are all some of them are longtime members of the Chinese Historical Society. So this is, in a way, our church, our community, and we're able to share by sharing our cultural values and historical values. We understand each other, and so we kind of communicated at this higher level here. But there are also many of us who are making conscious efforts to get involved and be doing things. I see Paul on the screen here, and he has been a co-leader of our backpacking trips to Sing Peak and Yosemite for the past 10 years. And just before this meeting, he was part of a planning discussion to go up there for the 11th time. And Paul is my age. We're about 3/4 of a century old. So we, I think, find outlets that will help keep our bones healthy and our lungs in shape. So that's part of it. And I'm sure diet has contributed to a lot of that too. I don't see actually any other questions. I see a comment. Another one from Irene. Irene has had a lot of good questions here. So beans have about 15 grams of protein per cup, and tofu is similar. Now, greens have some protein, but if a person needs 60 grams of protein a day, how can we reach that level? How do we get to 60 grams of protein?
Well, the 60 grams is a generous number. I mean, the minimum you actually need is probably about 35. So it's actually generally very easy. Protein will be in every single plant food. You don't need it from any animal product. So you'll get plenty of protein. Whereas those who are way into animal products have problems getting enough fiber. So if you're into plant food, you'll have no problems getting enough fiber, 40, 45 grams a day, maybe 30 minimum for females, 45 for males. And yet for the average American, they get about 10 grams of fiber a day, quite low. And that's why they have all the bowel problems that they have. Related to that, I want to go back to the calcium issue again, and that is one of the problems with a lot of animal protein is that it promotes calcium loss. So when you get too much protein, you're getting up into the 90, 95 grams of protein, particularly animal protein, a day, then it promotes calcium loss in the urine, which then promotes kidney stone formation. It also promotes osteoporosis. The interesting thing in the Western countries, and including the United States, is that the higher the calcium intake, which is recommended, you're getting up to 1,200, 1,500 milligrams of calcium a day. Those countries that have the highest incidences of calcium intake also have the highest incidence of osteoporosis. So the issue is not calcium, adding calcium to the diet, it's preventing calcium loss. So the United States is not calcium insufficiency in their diet. The problem is losing calcium. And there's many ways in which we lose calcium out of our bones. One of which is high animal protein intake, which is acidic, and the acid problem. Also, I think I've lost you. The acid problem, acidic nature promotes the excretion of needing to be buffered. And in that buffering, calcium and phosphorus are released out of the bones and promotes osteoporosis. High intakes of caffeine do that.
I recall somewhere that having vitamin D helps with absorption of calcium.
Vitamin D will help with absorbing calcium and putting it into the bones.
Okay, so reduce the loss.
Yeah. And that's one of the problems, when people take calcium supplements all by themselves without vitamin D, let's say, that shuts off the production of vitamin D. And vitamin D we need not only for calcium, but we need it for other things, for your immune function, for heart function, and those types of things, and for gene function. So you don't want to shut off your vitamin D. So you don't want to overdo the calcium.
Or is 20 minutes of sunshine a day, that substitute for a vitamin D supplement?
Yeah, the only way to really know if your sunshine exposure is adequate is to get a vitamin D level. That's really the only way to know, because we're darker skinned, so we need more sunlight than the Caucasians. The blacks need even more sunlight. You need to do sunlight without sunscreen on. You need sunlight in the middle of the day between 10 and 2 or 3 p.m. That sun is the one that's most effective for forming vitamin D. So, depending on your latitude of where you exist in the world, the closer to the equator, the better. The farther north or south you get from the equator, the less effective the sunlight is. So and it's how much skin you expose to your sunlight. So you need to really get it measured so you really know whether you're getting adequate amounts or not, and then whether you need to supplement or not.
So I just learned something, that I need more sunlight than my lighter skinned friends.
Exactly.
Okay.
Where I work in the correctional facility, all of these young people are coming into our institution. They've already been in juvenile hall or some other institution, so they're not getting outside. They're darker skinned. They're either Hispanic or Black primarily. Very few Asians, very few Caucasians. Invariably, they're vitamin D deficient. Invariably, we have to end up supplementing them all.
Okay. Well, just
So the person doesn't have to worry too much about calcium. There's people on the planet who have as little as 400, 500 milligrams of calcium a day, and they don't have osteoporosis. That's because they're active, they're exercising, they're stressing their bones, so it tends to maintain the calcium. They are in sunlight, so they're getting plenty of vitamin D. They're not eating a lot of animal protein. They're eating plants, and so they don't have the problems with osteoporosis that we do.
okay.
They don't drink tons of coffee and all those other kinds of things. They don't drink soft drinks that have phosphoric acid, which also leaches calcium out of the bones. So we do a lot of things in the standard American lifestyle that promote calcium loss.
Mhm. Wow. So kind of related to adding supplements, are there any particular sources or brands or places where we can get better supplements, quality supplements?
That's a real puzzle, and that's a real problem because the industry is not regulated by the FDA because it's a supplement. It's not regulated like medications are. So the quality control can be terrible. And in general, when they have looked at these different supplement companies, a high percentage of them, sometimes up to 50%, don't even have what's supposed to be in them and don't have what the amount that they say they're in them. So it's very, very tough. So you have to try to go with reputable sources. And I mean, like I said, we had to, we get our vitamin D from Costco, and it's cheap, and just have my vitamin D measured. And I know it works because my vitamin D levels markedly changed with their vitamin D. So that's one of the things you can measure. Unfortunately, there's some supplements you can't measure. And so it gets a lot tougher.
How do you measure your vitamin D level?
It's a blood test.
A blood test.
The blood test.
Okay. I guess I've never seen that in my blood screenings. So maybe I should be asking for that specifically.
Yes. And we know that vitamin D levels are correlated with susceptibility to COVID. So if your vitamin D levels are low, your COVID chance of getting COVID and having more severe COVID go up.
Wow. Hear that, everyone? We're learning something here.
And one of the theories about why influenza is so much worse in the winter is the thinking that maybe it's because there's less sunlight and because there's more vitamin D deficiency that people get influenza more in the winter.
This is really been a really a good learning journey for us. Now, we've kind of run over a little bit past our normal time, and maybe what we could do is, if anybody has further questions, you can send them to the Historical Society through our website, chssc.org. I think maybe we'll find a related topic and have a follow-up discussion with you. Actually, I was very curious about how to reverse diabetes, which has been a major problem in our community, which likes to eat white rice, right? And,
Exactly.
yeah. So So it would be really good to learn how we can and make life better for us. So I'm sorry if we can't answer all of the questions or comments, but I'd like to, if we were all in person, like to have everybody give a hand to Dr. Lowe, and this is a really fun learning experience, because a lot of this has dealt with food, which we all like. By the way, I should mention that on my stove, I have a pot with chicken feet simmering. And I realize it's not plant-based, but it's something that I really like, and it has a lot of collagen, and I figure it's good for my bone health. So, or for my joint health anyway. And so I've been reading a little bit about the health benefits of that. Well, so I would like to thank you, Dr. Lowe, and it's been a real pleasure hearing your words and being able to learn from you. I'm sure I share the thoughts of many of our audience who include new people, friends. Oh, I see Gladys here, who taught us how to debone a chicken up in Yosemite. But so we have a lot of common cultural histories that we enjoy sharing. And so, Dr. Lowe, thank you very much. Now I'd like to pass the mic over to Susan Dixon, our past president and our current vice president of programs, and she'll tell us a little bit about what's coming up. Susan?
So just stay on after mine, because Ricky Leo is going to end with a video, if I recall. But I want to thank also the China Society, because they are co-sponsoring with us. And I want you to invite you back next week. This will be the first time that we've done two meetings in a month, but there is a very talented high schooler who has worked with Dr. Will, and he taught her how to interview, and she has interviewed her grandmother, and we'll find out that history. And then join us on March 1st, where we have, all of a sudden I can't think of what his name is, Ronald Chu. And he has written a book about his own family history in the Midwest. So we hope that you would come back. And all of you that aren't members, please consider membership for the Historical Society. You could go to our website at chssc.org. And so Ricky's going to finish it up with a video. Ricky, you're on.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lowe. That was a wonderful talk you gave, and we've had that soup and it's delicious, and also Kevin's date dessert. But now I'd like to end with another New Year's tradition, which is the lion dance. I would just like to wish everybody a Happy New Year the Rabbit. And that performance was by the Camarillo Kung Fu Club, led by Judge Ki Chu Ling.
Thank you, Ricky. That was great. And I wish, on behalf of the Chinese Historical Society of Southern California, I'd like to wish everyone a happy, healthy, prosperous new year. Thank you for joining us.